Minnesota Liberty, sponsored by the Libertarian Party of Minnesota. This evening, we were going to talk about seemingly, I think, what's on, everybody's mind, metaphorically, like trending, the international, things that are going on, war, all that kind of stuff that just seems to be on people's minds. So we're going to discuss the party's platform in regards to war, kind of go into all that information. I have TJ Hawthorne and Jeremy Peichel on with me this evening. Hi guys, how's it going?
Hi.
Good. I should change my little label there so you got my last name too.
Yeah, well, I remembered it this time, so good.
That's great.
Yeah. So we had, let's just start from kind of the beginning. Let's have the American government has a very long history of failed foreign policy, right? And this goes back even to before like our day. I mean, we're all of kind of, current generations, the global war on terror, Iraq, Afghanistan, those kinds of things. Prior to that, even like our parents were through the generation of Vietnam, right? Also more failed foreign policy, military policy, just nothing came out of it. There was no end game. There was no, it was just all bad. There's nothing good anybody can say about any of those different areas. So I guess I'll start out the conversation with that.
I like to, what really got me to realize how counterintuitive and dumb war is the false flags that started it, really, and what then gets folks riled up, and then you get this false emotion amongst a majority of the country, and then you bomb the shit out of innocent people. And so that cycle is so recognizable now. Once you've seen the light, it is bright as day whenever it happens. And so we, with what's going on right now, okay, let's throw a couple carriers out in the Persian Gulf and wait for somebody to attack them. And then we can just strike right back and say, look what you did to us. And like, you put your foot in the door, I'm closing my damn door.
You're right.
Up. Like,
right.
Get out of here. Get out of my backyard. And what are we doing there? And once you wait, they said they're mad at us because we're in their backyard. How about we have some little empathy? What would we do if MF and countries had bases in our backyard?
Yeah.
It's funny when you say it like that. It makes me think about how the failures of foreign policy actually go back to European settlement in the United States, where we had 500 different nations that existed in this territory, and one by one, their backyard was stepped on, and they were excluded from their land, mass murdered, disarmed, all manner of mechanisms to remove them because they didn't support American interests at the time. And that's what I feel like this whole thing is about, is just pushing a egocentric agenda on somebody else's land and somebody else's livelihood.
Yeah, where what's boiling down to this area that is now Israel and Gaza, to me, I guess I can't think of anything more, but I don't know a lot of the conflicts in the globe as far as land necessity, right? Of course, Russia and Ukraine, this festival in Crimea and stuff, that almost, to me, that's another subject. We can go on to that or whatever, but that does seem to be the two big conflicts that are going on right now, is just a chunk of land in both areas that is less the size of so many United States.
Yeah. So Iraq, we were there from 2003, and then we kind of pulled out a little bit, and then we went right back in. And
kind of pulled out, though. That was the thing, is there was no real pullout, and we created more terrorists. With every bomb you drop, you create another person that is going to hate America, because Well, you just killed my friend standing right there.
Right.
Yeah, but we shifted away from more uniformed service presence to special forces and private
Sure.
contractors, and
Yeah,
that
just
somehow
drones.
makes a difference.
Or
We're not.
just drones.
Yeah, we're paying people to bomb civilians, not doing it ourselves.
Yeah, and then we were in Afghanistan, and I mean, literally just lived through the ending of that, right? And leaving, and that is an absolute disaster. I mean, I feel for the people that live that are from Afghanistan that are still there, because once we left, I mean, they're not, everything just kind of, Taliban, all that kind of stuff just went back, but they're not going to be kind to the people that they saw as American sympathizers. Just like in Iraq, if you were if you were even considered an American sympathizer and an Iraqi and lived in Iraq, like that was we put a giant bullseye on people's backs. I try not to think about it, and I guess we're all veterans, and I was in the Army. Jeremy, were you in the Army also?
Yeah, I was in the Army.
Okay,
Yep.
and then
I was a squid. I was in the Navy.
okay, well, I won't hold that against you, but it's fine. But I think about like our, the people the translators and the people that worked with us, the ones that still lived in the cities that we were, stationed in, and think about, ISIS came in, and then everything that's happened since then. How do we, like, who knows if they're still even alive? I mean, because so much has happened, so much has changed over, so much conflict. I mean, Saddam wasn't a good guy either, but we made it worse.
And it's really hard to say. I don't really know how bad of a guy Saddam was.
Really. It was pretty bad.
I mean, and I'm sure it was bad enough, but I don't know how you think of other countries that they have to revolt and have their own type of revolution because we can't just make it happen, because you always install whoever comes next is just another idiot. And
yeah, one of the things we did in Iraq was try to work with the sheiks, the tribal leaders, and try to get them to work together. I mean, they didn't want to. They didn't want to, it's so other countries' ideas of government and what that should look like, and the way that they manage their people, their land, their borders, that kind of stuff.
That's up to them. Totally.
Yeah.
People are going to outright reject democracy. And I feel like that's kind of an arrogant American position, to just assume that everybody wants democracy, and that not everybody does.
And even the idea of freedom. So by going into a country, we put a target on people that are more moderate or liberal, and that are, they kind of are out in the open then as revealed individuals who are not interested in the regime of control. And so they become then known to those who want to wipe out the opposition party. In Iraqis particular, their issue was that their administrative state was very local and tribal, and Saddam was successful in governing that whole territory assigned to the country by the British. Like they said, these are the lines now, you are going to govern in this space, because that's what British people do. So he managed to keep it in line through, the threat of significant force, chemical weapons, mass killings. Like that meant that you were going to be able to get stuff done in that administrative state. And then we come in, and even the bureaucrats who weren't part of the murder regime were barred from service. And so we basically said, all that government organization you had built up to deliver clean water and food and repair my roads and do stuff like that, none of you people are allowed to come back into government service, because we're scared you're going to pick up a gun and threaten Americans who are here imposing our will. And Afghanistan, I feel like, is even worse, because we show up there. We took longer to learn the lesson of failure in that territory than the Russians did. They figured it out in 8 years that you can't win a war in Afghanistan. It took us more than 20 to get there. And they returned to exactly the same place, but we did a good good job of identifying those people who were opposed to the Taliban and making it publicly available so that the Taliban could make their lives hell. So it's really frustrating to see that we don't think about how we're breaking things when we enter. We just think that everyone's going to be better when they live like we do. But maybe that territory or that culture or that the infrastructure in place is not ready to have that kind of lifestyle governance or even the relationships and trust in each other that exists here.
Have you seen The Covenant, the movie?
I haven't.
I think it's got what's his name? I can't remember his name. The guy that's also in Brokeback Mountain. Like, that's how I associate. I can't remember his name though. Anyways, but The Covenant is about a special forces soldier who goes in with his team on a weapons cache sweep, and they have an interpreter with them. The mission is just complete failure. His entire team dies except for him and his interpreter, and they are able to escape. He, within, I think it's like 24, 48 hours, and they're on foot trying to get away. I think it was 160 clicks from their base over, like mountains through Afghanistan. Like, it's not just, flat desert, like 160 clicks is more like 460 on foot because of, up and down. Right. And so they're trying to get back on foot. Their vehicles are gone. Their communications are gone. Their people are gone. They have one gun. And within 48 hours, the Taliban catch up to them and the soldier is shot. And so and he's captured, at least for a little bit. His translator saves him and kills off all the Taliban that have him. But he is like seriously wounded. He's been shot in the thigh. He's been, beat up and hit in the head. He's not doing good. He's very poor for 3 weeks. And it's a true story. For 3 weeks, the interpreter on foot through the mountains, Afghanistan, gets him back to his base and saves his life, keeps him alive, because they don't have food and water on them, keeps him drinking, because he's at no point is able to even like get up and walk himself. Like, he makes a litter and just a makeshift litter out of, trees and small branches and stuff, and drags him through the mountains in Afghanistan to get him back to the base.
Dang.
Gets him back, saves his life. Like, they got all the bodies to everybody else. His body was missing. They didn't know what happened for 3 weeks, right? Can you imagine the family of the guy? That's a long time to not know what's going on. And you just assume he's dead, right? Like,
and the unit too, the commander and his other brothers and sisters back on base who are like, where is he? What's going on?
Right. Yeah. And so, but the translator gets him back. He's still alive. They get him the medical attention he needs. They ship him back to the United States. His tour is done. Then he finds out that his translator was just sent back home in Afghanistan. Like, he lives in the village next to the base. But because of his story and how, like everything that they had to go through, he becomes like a legend, a local legend. And the Taliban are now out to get him and his family. And so they're on the run. So then the soldier finds out that that's the case for them and flies himself back into Afghanistan and saves his family and his interpreter. It saves the interpreter and his interpreter's family's life, right? Like, you got to go watch this movie. I normally don't like movies like this, it's just, but this was a good movie. This will make you feel good at the end. But anyways, I thought that was amazing, because we don't always have, American military does not always have a good reputation when it comes to how we left, the locals when we pulled out of, whatever conflict it is, usually there. But in that case, that was a different scenario, but go watch.
And even along with that too, we have relationships with third country nationals that we bring into these war zones, and we don't pay them well. We don't treat them well. And then if they make any mistake within this very tight regime of behavior that's acceptable for them, they can be left in the lurch in a way that is not easy to recover from, and we imported them basically to a war zone to serve menial tasks and do all manner of things. And so I feel like that story is undertold as well. So yes, we have a terrible impact on the local population, and use people like they're disposable sometimes in
Yep.
those spaces. And there's nothing that we as the grunts on the ground can do about it. We just do the best we can with everybody that we have. But leadership, politicians, whoever's making these decisions are abandoning people that serve side by side with us. And it's frustrating to watch and to see some of those abuses that just continue through contracting, whatever's going on in Iraq right now. I know that they've got missile defense systems there. They just deployed more Patriots, from what I was hearing, into Al-Assad. I can't believe that base still exists. But we're still operating space in the worst part of Mesopotamia. I don't get it.
I mean, and maybe they're anticipating, like, I mean, if I was a warmongering politician, right, and I was looking for a new fight to pick because it's going to make me rich, like the military-industrial complex relies off of these incidences that they are essentially creating just by remaining there.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and like if I was like, hey, I know that this is the ultimate goal, right? Like I'm just looking for the next fight. I'm going to make sure that we don't lose our footing. And because it is strategically, it's so close proximity. And now right next to, I mean, within firing distance to Palestine, Israel, like that's, coincidence, maybe.
No. Well, that's just it. They're already, that occupation is causing the next whatever Israeli raid by Hamas, and then, I always use the same thing. I say it, and I think I've said it on the show before, is I have two sons that are 4 years apart. And when the younger son finally has had enough of being picked on, he strikes once, and then the older son pummels him. It's like, that's what's going on. We're just the bully going around like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Look I got 2 aircraft carriers over here. What are you going to do? And all of a sudden, oh, are you kidding me? No, it's over. Like, what kind of shit is that? I thought we were better than that. And kind of going back to where we were talking about before, when I talked to some of my friends about this and what's going on, and think, don't you think about the innocent people that are dying over there? Like, there's a specific group of these people and a specific group of these people, whether they're government or not, right? And this is one thing that Walter Hudson wants to, and so many people want to say, well, they were voted. Hamas was voted in. That's their government. So those people are responsible for what their government. It's like, it's so easy to say Joe Biden and wait. Don't we have conversations all the time? You can talk to anybody and every single person. It's just like cliche to think or to know politicians are dirty, evil people. Like, everybody believes this, and they will say it to your face, and then you say, but they're the ones causing this dirty, evil shit, and you continue to vote for them.
Yeah. Well, and he mentioned earlier that, like, about people being disposable. So when you have the military-industrial complex who puts, the dollar and the power and that kind of stuff as their first, we're all disposable, all of us, every single person here. They don't care about us as people at all.
But there are a lot of normies that I have spoken to, and when it's happening over there, right? And even, okay, now what about the inflation that's happening here now? That is definitely a correlation going on between the endless spending in the wars and printing all the money, and it's finally hitting here. But we've spent enough, and the rest of the world uses enough of our money that it hasn't been as bad, but it's becoming.
You missed the memo, TJ. I saw in the New York Times that
Janet Yellen said we could afford 3 wars now.
Well, no, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about Paul Krugman saying that we kicked inflation if you leave out housing and food and something else. Transportation, maybe, I forget.
Yeah, all those things that
unessential components of the CPI. You just leave those out. We've whipped inflation. It's done. War's over, man. Go home.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said about all that. Every damn thing, propaganda, the marketing that they want to here's a table, and let's zoom out or zoom in and then see what has actually happened in this table. You got
or leave out things that don't help us tell the story, right?
The data points go away, and all of a sudden, oh, that's exactly what I want it to look like.
The politician thing, though, I want to go back to what you said about Hamas being elected. If you look back at our elections, every president since Ronald Reagan has been a war criminal at some point in their administration. Yes. And committed atrocities against civilians overseas in other countries and some of our own citizens. Exactly. And recognizing that, to not separate Hamas, the terrorist components, from Hamas, the political party. There, you can execute on a political agenda without violence. And that's kind of the core of our principles, right? But to assume that everyone in Hamas ascribes to the agenda of political violence is a little ignorant, because you have diversity of opinion across every individual person. They're not a monolith. But at the same time, to say, oh, they elected them, so they're responsible for them. Well, we elected every president since Ronald Reagan, and they bombed plenty of civilians. So who's going to answer for that?
No doubt. Exactly. It's so easy to see that. Again, we've seen the light, so now it's bright as day. And I just don't know how to relay that and get someone to understand that. But I going back to that exact thing, when I talk to these people, sometimes they just literally say, I don't care. It's happening over there, and I have this. So don't you want to keep having this? It's like, wait, back up. We just talked about babies dying and children dying. And guess what? Every time their dad dies and the child doesn't die, well, now you have another enemy of us because of these war crimes that we're committing, and because of
those
this thing.
Kids that are being raised in that environment are going to grow up with this understanding of, that they're going to live out the rest of their life. They're not going to not hold that against whoever it was that killed off their family. That's going to be a part of them, especially, happening, at any point. It doesn't matter. You kill off somebody's loved ones, there is an internal need. It's just a human part of nature. Yeah. Like for retribution, and then that just keeps the cycle going.
Totally. It is an endless cycle.
If you look at the manufacture of the weapons that are killing Israelis and Palestinians, civilians, made in the USA, man.
Right.
Every time.
Right.
And those surgical strikes, those bombs that are, cause you to be so arrogant to believe that you can hit a precision target from 35,000 feet. The margin of error is small, but it's big enough to encompass a city block. And so, you think you're being precise on what you're claiming as a military target. That Hamas and other organizations really like to place hardened military targets adjacent to soft civilian facilities to try to deter strikes like that. You're going to have accidents happen, collateral damage, which also, is really, it's not collateral. It's the cost of war. And these people are choosing to make those decisions.
I know. I had somebody tell me, they were like, well, like the footage is coming out, Ukraine and Israel and Palestine or Gaza and, all these things. They were like, that's not actually happening. There's not actually civilians being killed. There's not children dying. There's none of this is happening. I was like, no, of course it is. Of course it is. This is any time that there is an engagement in this capacity, the people that are going to suffer the most for it are the ones that had nothing to do with it at all. Like the ones that can't defend themselves, the ones that just want to live their lives, the ones that were just innocent bystanders. They're the ones that are going to pay for the entire war. It's just the way it is. That you can't separate the two.
What kills me is
war. You have to be willing to some degree. If you want, you have to give up your morality. Like you can't just promote war and then think that you can still hold on to your morality. You can't. It's incompatible.
Yeah, and this one's out in the open too. That's what really gets me, is that both sides of the Israel-Hamas conflict, or if you can even call it that, they're very transparent in their callousness toward each other due to a long history of cultural and religious battle back and forth. That There were earlier occupants there in the Palestinians. It was allocated in the 40s after World War II out of global guilt and European belief that they know what's best for the world in colonialism. And now we created this problem as part of that victory regime out of World War II, if you could call it that. And now other people get to pay the price for those decisions. It's frustrating because both parties and others that are getting involved in this conflict are choosing to use civilians as either a weapon to use in the media, whether that's starvation, fuel cutoff, whatever, or actually targeting them. And both of those are ridiculous outcomes.
Yeah. So there was in the Libertarian Party, Justin Amash. And I mean, I'm bringing it up, but there's a part of me that's like, doesn't even want to talk about it because it's just so horrific. But he had family in Gaza because he's Palestinian. That was in, I don't know how to say it, the church Saint Polyphorus, I don't know how to say it, but there was a church in Gaza and the church was hit. Now, the church wasn't the target, what the Israelites are claiming. But regardless, it was hit and it collapsed and everybody inside of it died, and including Justin Mosh's family. And so, I mean, war doesn't discriminate against age, and some of the pictures that are coming out of that are just are horrific. There's no other word for it, just horrific.
I think a lot of it though is, and Rebecca, I'm just the emotional response. Look at, right? This guy is someone that we hold to we like the way who this person has become, and we've looked up to Justin, and now we're feeling somewhat of a personal attack when somebody in his family gets attacked. Well, think of that. That's exactly what I'm saying before, is that when you have this emotional response to something like this and just want to go react, this is what happens. And it's constant. And back to Jeremy's, I mean, that whole history of that conflict, exactly that conflict, it's so much propaganda. And you could say, here's what I think we can all agree on, or we could agree on the facts of what happened, what Jeremy was just explaining, the colonization and all this. And these people thought this was best for them and this was best for them. And you could say that to someone else, say, no, that's not what happened. This is not. And so at what end can you ever explain to them how, imagine 2 million people in this tiny little strip of land, you throw a rocket in that place, you're going to hit an innocent person regardless. And they say, no doubt is the strategy to deter firing rockets at those places is to have the places near them. And that's what they say. Oh, they're so bad. Dude, you can't not have it by a place. It's that densely populated. I heard someone tell me that it's the most densely populated area in the world, like more than China.
And so a lot of
China, like, I don't know what cities are really densely populated, but 2 million folks in a little small strip of land.
Yeah. And so a lot of the conflict in the Middle East, right, because of Israel, is the Muslim, Jewish, the land is disputed because of their history and everybody thinks they have claim to it, right? But the church that was hit in Gaza was Christian. I mean, it's not either of them. This is just, and they couldn't, from what I read, they couldn't go to South Gaza, where the Israelis had told them to evacuate to, because there's no place to go. Egypt's not letting them out. Israel's not letting them in. And on the other side, there's just ocean. Where are they going to go? So they went into a church, which actually, according to Geneva Convention, you're not allowed to bomb churches. Church still got hit. Is anybody going to be held accountable for that? Absolutely not.
When they ever.
Oh, yeah. They wouldn't be. And the thing is, too, the explosion didn't, the bomb that they dropped itself landed in the street next to the church, between the Target and the church annex building. And because those things are so heavy and carry a lot of explosives, it shook the poor old building to the ground. Like the only way to win is to not play.
Right.
And to just exit the situation. But if you're trapped there because the organization that is attacking you is preventing you from leaving, they're basically keeping you in the barrel so they can eventually hit you with those shots.
Yep.
It's just a matter of time.
Oh.
It's,
Yeah. Well, and to then escalate it and dare Iran to keep moving and Hezbollah and all these, and so boom, and then this I don't know if you know who Guy Swan is, was on with Clint Russell earlier, and Turkey is willing to get involved in some Sunni Muslim capital. You know what I mean? So I'm pretty sure that's what the Iranians are too, and that's, I don't know, like that kind of history as far as their religion stuff. Okay, but their allies want to talk about entangling alliances that the U.S. has been involved with for our whole lifetime.
Yeah,
and,
the
like you
Shia
expect somebody
Sunni
else
thing
not to have an alliance too.
Yeah, the Shia Sunni thing. And so Iran is Shia, and they unfortunately located their country so close to our bases in Afghanistan and Iraq. It's really annoying. I wish they wouldn't have done that.
Bet.
But then they've got friends in Lebanon that are also similar religious ties that want to get stuff done because they think that people are occupying their land that they have a right to, and they worship the wrong version of the lineage of prophets. And so this whole area is filled with not just religious conflict, but you've got ethnic conflict with the politics around Kurdistan in that space too, which hasn't even come up because they're so busy just killing people for any number of reasons. Turkey's not even, we don't even get to hear about how Turkey is trying to exterminate Kurds that are living in Turkey or in Syria, the spaces that they exist. The Russians are right there helping out too. And so this whole thing to me just seems like a desired area to have this proxy war fought out between all these different groups that have interests, but don't want to have the fight on their soil. They just want to kill other people's people. And so they throw money and weapons and yay, support, like back them up, we stand with Hamas, or we stand with Israel, or we stand with whoever, Hezbollah, or
right.
It doesn't even matter. It's just a different flag to attack civilians, and it's exhausting. And the ordinary citizens, I mean, I've seen videos of Israelis trying to ask their government to stand down. I've seen Palestinians doing the exact same thing, just trying to survive in this conflicted space where the people in power don't have to pay the price, but they're certainly willing to let their citizens do that.
Oh yeah. Well, you find the people that are advocating for these wars, they're never going to be the ones that volunteer to go out and be boots on the ground and help out with that. They're not the ones fighting. They're gonna get some poor suckers, that think they're just being honorable and patriotic for their country, or that they need a regular paycheck. That the military has something that offers that's stability, security, a future, college, whatever.
One of my good buddies in boot camp, man, I get 3 hots and a cot, man. Hell yeah.
Yeah. Free clothing. What do you need? What more do you need? Right. It makes me nervous too, because, with now we have a Speaker of the House. And so, the people's body of the Congress is going to start doing their own version of warmongering. And there was some standing ovation related to supporting Israel and more lukewarm reception for Ukraine support. But it makes me wonder, at what point do we start sending advisors, to start shaping the outcomes in that space into a strategic, or some version of our strategic vision for what this should look like when the bombs stop dropping. And maybe we're already doing it and we just don't hear about it as much. I don't know what sort of military presence we have now, but I'm convinced that with the way that congressional Republicans have been talking about this, that we're not far behind from sending some amount of support. TJ, you were talking before about the carriers and destroyers,
They're already there.
cruisers moving into the space.
Yeah.
Like
They've
we are
already
just
deployed
preparing to start deploying more boots there because that's how we know we can achieve the outcomes that we at least prefer as politicians here.
Stick our foot in the door. When it gets slammed, then we're going to bust it open and start laying down fire.
Okay, so article from CNN, U.S. Marine Rapid Response Force moving toward Israel as Pentagon strengthens military posture in region. Two defense officials familiar with the planning said rapid response team consisting of 2,000 Marines and sailors is being sent. It's a growing number of U.S. warship and forces converging on Israel as the U.S. seeks to send a message of deterrence to Iran and the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah.
You know who would be with that group that's mobilizing? Charlie Kuklins. As a corpsman, he was attached to a Marine force. People that are in his position when he was in the military will be deployed along with that group and out there positioned in a place that isn't protecting American interests, but is protecting some, indirect political goal that's somehow set out before us.
Yeah. The Marines don't have their own medics, so they have Navy corpsmen that get attached to the Marine units to, help with the medical needs of the Marines.
I don't know that I'd want a Marine medic treating me if I had an injury.
I don't know. I spent
an Army medic. I'm just saying.
Most of my Navy career was with the Marines, actually, and I always get asked, "Oh, were you a corpsman?" No, I was just an avionics nerd, and they temporarily assigned me for the whole 2-year tour to a Marine squadron. So there was 2 sailors in a shop of 18 Marines in the first 2 years, and then I got the same thing in a deployment in Iwakuni. Funny thing is, I never set foot on a ship in the Navy. I never deployed on a carrier or any kind of ship, so I've missed out. I know now, but now I get to travel to see the world. I've been to Afghanistan 3 times as a civilian, and
really,
I've traveled to FOBs and seen and met a lot of interesting folks out there. 4th of July 2010 was my first trip, and that was the most interesting trip. We worked on Hamid Karzai's Air Force One fuel system that the contractor I was working with said right away. He's like, oh, so it's a system that we sent out the parts in 2005, and it was in 2010. Now I'm coming back to say, okay, we're ready to start it. I brought almost a whole control panel's worth of equipment because I don't know what's left out there. And sure enough, the guy said, once you guys get this done and leave, these guys that run this Air Force are going to pillage all the parts and sell them to wherever they can get a buyer. This will not be operational. Everything you're doing right now to make this operational is for nothing.
You probably saw the Sawzall coming behind you as you walked away from the plane.
Yes. Yeah, and it was an interesting time. That was the first trip. And then the last trip, the second to last trip, I went out there. My boss was already there, and we drove to Shank, which was near Pakistan. It's like on the border. There's mountains, and it was February, so I was told that the Taliban is dormant in the wintertime. Like, we were never really fought there in the wintertime because the Taliban was dormant. But in the summertime, we get mortars coming into this base all the time. And I was like, roger that. Well, on the way to that base, my boss stayed the night in Kabul the night before, and I landed. On the way back, he saw a bombed fuel truck on the road that we were driving. And he goes, the Turkish guy that was driving us, hey, that wasn't here last night, was it? And he goes, Nope, that's new. And so he just kind of like froze, and I look at him like, where do you think we are? What do you think has been going on for the last decade here? You think you're just gonna fly over here and sell shit? Like, we came to a war zone, and so the thing is that the folks, like the Turkish folks that we worked with, it's very interesting to see the difference of the opinion of why we're there. And the other Jordanian army was at that FOB that I got to go. I met some guys at the gym, and you really hear a different perspective. But a lot of it still was brainwashed propaganda that they hate us because we're free. And that is I wasn't fucking brainwashed like that, man. I tell you what, that was why I'm so pissed about it, because I really believed that until I read the words that Osama bin Laden said why they hate us. And this is exactly why. The occupation of Gaza and all this shit, and they are bringing more settlers into Gaza, into Palestine, all wherever they want to consider Palestine, West Bank, and whatever these things, but they keep occupying somebody's home and control the electricity and the water and all this stuff. And if you think they're not being the bully, they're the bully. And I don't know, folks that just want to say, well, Hamas did this is bad. This is it. It's not binary like that, really, but it still is the emotional response. Back to that. You see these young women and all these kids getting murdered in plain daylight. Like, there's an emotional response, and then we must kill. Like, no, that's not defending yourself either. That's what the F? They have the right to defend themselves. People keep saying that shit. That's not defending yourself. That's retaliating. Right. It's a whole different thing.
Yeah, it's self-defense, though. If you march into somebody else's home and they try to strike you when you're standing in their living room,
yeah,
you're defending yourself against their aggression.
Well,
you gotta fight back.
Oh man.
Yeah, it's a tough situation because they are pinned between inhospitable desert and the Mediterranean Sea, and they got to figure out a way to live together, but they'd rather live apart.
Yeah, and that's
There's
where
not room for it.
That's where, you know what? I guess I don't really have an answer for it, because somebody's gonna say, "Well, what do you do then?" I get the F away and let them handle this. We get the F away from all that and let them handle this.
Stop funding the murder of civilians and calling it patriotism.
Yeah.
Well, and if you are, if you have a family and you have kids, mom, dad, don't you have a responsibility to your children to live in some place that's not going to kill you? I mean, like, even if I felt like that, Gaza is my home, or wherever it is that's my home. I'm even thinking of like the Yazidis in Iraq, completely and utterly wiped out. Like, they're just, for the most part, just gone because of ISIS. Like, if I know that where I'm living is extraordinarily dangerous to the future of my family, I would feel an internal responsibility to leave. But then, I mean, and so that kind of goes into the, the refugee. I mean, why wouldn't, and that now we have we have for a long time had a refugee, like there's this constant stream of people out of the Middle East, and countries are closing their doors. They're making it hard. Our ways to try to get into the United States is extraordinarily difficult, so
I understand where you're coming from with the responsibility to your current family. I think there's also the importance of weighing the cultural ties to the history of a place and the ancestors that are still there.
Yeah.
So they will still remain under the feet of the occupiers, and it's going to be hard to rectify that when you've run away from tending to that history of your family in a place. And so I can understand why someone would accept a certain level of threat of violent death because they feel connected to that spot.
Well, and we see that by evidence by how many people are still there.
Yeah.
I mean, even with as many people that are leaving, there's still a lot of people left. I mean, some people are making the choice, but a lot of people are not. And you're right, for those reasons. Like, this is home. If you're not going to defend your home, then what are you going to do? And I mean, you were talking about, like, if somebody came to our home.
Most of the folks that live there know.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't think most of them know the difference. Somebody's lagging here. It might be me. I don't know. I'm in the hotel.
It was you, TJ, but it's okay. We caught you.
I know from being in the Army, deployed. When I was deployed to Iraq and I came home, like, part of my story is having to come to terms with the fact that we were the occupiers. Like, that was kind of my evolution into I won't say into the Libertarian Party. Like joining the Libertarian Party was a natural decision because of where I already was in life. But recognizing that being a soldier on the ground in Iraq and then coming home, all the fallout that happened from being in Iraq, all the emotional, the personal, the things that our unit went through, and then living through all that. But then in addition to that, having to come to terms with, it's a lot easier to manage all those other things emotionally and think that you still did something that was, righteous and good, and you were there for good reasons, and we made it a better place by our presence. But that wasn't the case, right? Like, that's not what happened. And then having to come home and come to terms with, we were in fact the bad guys. Like, they weren't the insurgents, they were just defending their homes. And if somebody comes into my home and tries to pull the same thing on me, of course we're going to react in that same manner, because this is my home, and how dare you come into my home and try to take over and tell me what to do.
Right. That's exactly how I feel this whole thing is. We are the bullies and we're occupying, and how the F would we feel? How every single person, if there was a base of, you name the country. Yeah. Germans come and play with us in some of our bases.
Russia, Ukraine, man. Same thing.
Yeah.
Crimea is mine. Ukraine was never a state. Yeah. Don't have to worry about it. We just decide that territorial integrity doesn't matter in Afghanistan and Iraq because they blew up a couple buildings and killed a couple thousand people. Suddenly that means international law doesn't apply. And we can just gather together with some friends who we can convince they need to join us, and we go invade their country and decide that we're going to stay there for a couple decades. Like, it's ridiculous. And then we act all fired up when somebody else tries to do the same thing. It's like, if it's good for us to do that sort of thing, then anybody should be able to do it, right?
Whataboutism, Jeremy? Are you kidding me? Don't be whataboutism.
I want to make sure that we are centered in our thinking about this, that if we are going to judge other countries for failing to acknowledge the self-determination principle for adjacent countries, we've got to hold ourselves to that same standard. And we have struggled with doing that as a country for a long time.
Failed, not struggled, failed.
I would base that off of American arrogance. Like, there's just this level of arrogance that even, Americans are, and we are Americans, but so I'm saying, not, this is us too, but kind of as I try not, I'm saying it collectively, but this is the situation, and we have the responsibility to make our country better, right? And we're working on that, which is why we're here in the first place. But American arrogance in general is the reason for that our policies have these, overarching, like, we can just go in and we can do whatever we want to, and nobody is ever held accountable. We don't hold the people who are in these positions of power accountable. There's no process for holding them accountable. Nobody's ever going to pay for what happened. They just get away with it. And so how do we stop that? How do we stop that from happening? From them just getting away with it?
Yeah, I think you were onto something before when you were talking about defend the guard, that the way that we can keep people accountable is by not playing that game and forcing them to take deliberate action in order to conduct this. Because right now it's all through War Powers Resolution, through the National Defense Authorization Act, the Overseas Contingency Operations, all those various congressional mechanisms to just remove the war power from Congress and the floor for debate and put it in the hands of a president who on a whim can just send 20-somethings to go die for a cause.
So we haven't technically been in a war in the United States since World War II. All the others have just been
Korea,
military.
right?
No, they were not a declared war.
Korea wasn't declared either.
Not a declared war. World War II was the last one. That was it. That's almost, at this point, almost 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And we have been almost in perpetual war since then.
Exactly.
It is so sad to think of it that way, but it's so obvious to us. Again, I every day I think of how to get someone to understand that message that I totally understand now, that it is just, you print the money and you make the war. So you print more money and you keep, well, Mitch McConnell, I mean, we all know what kind of shape he's in right now, but he was just saying some things about, well, there ain't no American troops dying over there. We're the money, it's not going over there. It's going to it's building our infrastructure here. And I'm like, or to build the bombs and to build the munitions. And I'm like, he's saying that shit right out loud. Like it doesn't matter. And guess
He's
what?
at the end of his life.
A lot of Americans
He
also
just needs oil.
agree
He'll
with
be
that.
fine. Just oil those joints.
Yeah.
That puppet will get moving again.
Oh my God. Am I lagging again?
No, you're good. No, I was talking about Mitch McConnell, man, not you.
Wouldn't that have been funny if I had a Mitch McConnell moment?
Yeah. Just freezing in place.
Well, oil your joints. You're getting old.
Yeah, but I mean, but locally, our best bet is to just keep our local troops from playing in that sandbox, right? Like if we can force Congress to actually debate the pros and cons of the politics of war on the floor, they're never going to get there. And it's such a high threshold for them to actually commit us to a conflict that we would actually reduce the amount of civilians around the world that are dying if we just revoke those powers to unilaterally kill somebody.
And in Minnesota,
100%.
what we can do is the Defend the Guard legislation, right? It's not going to fix the problem as a whole. And one of the hurdles that we have in our country is that it's the people at the top, the ones that are in charge nationally, the president. Those are the ones making this decision. But what we can do is protect our Minnesota National Guard from being used improperly, because a lot of those wars, Iraq, Afghanistan, and if we went to Israel, if we went to, Gaza, Ukraine, you name it, they rely very heavily on the National Guard to be able to prop up forces, because the current standing army is just not, there's not enough people to the degree of which they need to be able to fight a war on that scale, right?
That's how I got there. Tim Pawlenty sent me.
Are you in the National Guard?
That was my service, was in the Army National Guard and the Minnesota Guard.
You know what I think I've learned as well is I was active duty for my first 5 years, and then I was a reservist. And then my first attitude when I first met Marine reservists while I was active duty, and I had a bad attitude about them. They're kids that didn't do shit and whatever. But then I got in as a reservist, and I went on a deployment with a bunch of reservists to Kuwait as Navy Customs. And I really realized that, well, that force are real adults, real people that I really care about their life, and not the active duty force, because I work with them on a daily basis for the last 15 years too. They are the kids looking for 3 hots and a cot and just an easy paycheck. And gosh darn it, they are spoiled. These kids, you say that our service members don't get me wrong. I'm sure there's a lot of real hardened folks that do a lot of good shit, but I see a lot of this candy ass bullshit that happens in the military now. And it's just like, okay, let's see if we can fight a effing war.
That's right.
That's why we use the reserve force, because these are adults that actually, hey, you're going to take me away from my damn job. I'm getting the job done. I want to go home.
I feel like it's a different military than it was maybe when we were back in the day.
Every generation says that, though. I feel like.
I remember when I joined in 2000. I joined in 2000, right? So I was pre 9/11. I was already in the Army, and I remember hearing, the stories. Oh, this current generation, and like the cards. You just hold up your card if you're feeling too stressed or whatever. And we didn't actually. I don't know where that came from. We didn't have that in basic training.
I heard it was a Fort Jackson thing.
I was at Fort Jackson. I did not. I never saw those. So, but I've also heard that the generations now are we have coming out are, cell phone. They spend a lot of time on a screen. There's not as much activity. I mean, I at least came from Generation X. Like we were,
what about
out and running the neighborhood all day.
But what just happened actually in the last couple of years too? I know 2 Marines personally that are actually good Marines that got kicked out for not taking the vax. So they just also kicked out a bunch of free thinkers out of the damn military as well. So
I commend them for standing up for that, because that is not
I wish
easy to do.
I'd known that was going to happen to that kid, because he was, like I said, there's a lot of spoiled brats, but then there's some kids that stand out easily when they do the work. And so
do they get a general discharge then for not obeying orders?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think it was
they might have gotten like an other than honorable, which you have
OTA,
the opportunity to change that to an honorable later on.
Not a big chicken dinner, but
that's not great.
No, it's not great.
It's a black mark for at least a couple of years until you can get that fixed.
Yeah, because you can't get your VA benefits. You don't have access to any of the resources after you leave. You're cut off.
It would make sense that would be the case if you're refusing an order and that's why you're being discharged, right? I mean, that can't be an honorable discharge in that freaking freedom of mind.
Well, they use the military.
It's honorable as hell to me that they did that. They stood up for themselves.
I mean, they tested the pneumonia vaccine when they first created that on me. I entered back in 2000. I was one of the last pre 9/11 entrants, and it was interesting because we had informed consent, where the drill sergeant's standing over you while you're signing the waiver for the pneumonia vaccine. Like, I don't know if I got the actual vaccine or the salt water or whatever they were doing.
I was in the initial study group for the smallpox vaccine before it was sent out to the rest of. I was an Army medic, so like my unit was. They tested it on the medics, and they were like, "Hey," because we had the resources, at our aid stations or wherever we were to, be able to keep records and all this kind of stuff. CDC was still calling me. I think the last time they called me was 10 years ago to make sure I wasn't having any, serious side effects.
Died.
Yeah.
And all the anthrax.
By that time, I had moved across.
I got to skip anthrax. They actually let us say no to anthrax, and I skipped anthrax. I didn't get out of the smallpox, but I got to skip the anthrax. I was excited about that. I'm
pretty sure I had like 4 of those shots.
Yeah, it was the only vaccine I was able to get out of in the Army.
Yeah, one of the advantages of being a medic was that since we were the ones giving the vaccine, we could also just write it. Oh yeah, I got that, but not in the case of being in the control group for the smallpox. That was different. And then that was right before, and they already knew they were going to give it to the rest of the military, regardless of what it did to us, right? They were already going to do that.
Warp speed, baby.
Yep. So I don't remember what I was going to say after that, but we're almost at our 1 hour time period. I knew this was going to be kind of a quick moving conversation. War tends to, bring out a lot of opinions.
Especially when you bring 3 veterans together to talk about war.
And I didn't actually mean to do that. I was just like, hey, who's available tonight? And this is just how it was meant to be.
Yeah, I think actually TJ was one of the port cops when I was leaving country. We had talked about that. We might have overlapped a little bit.
Yeah, I think so. Although I wasn't at where you went through, right? I had a different mission, but the battalion, you definitely went through my battalion. And we did spend some time with those Red Bulls and played some poker and stuff. And it was a really amazing.
Confiscated some books from a friend of mine.
Dude, I hated that. That was the worst thing, and that's why I know I was.
It was already
I know I was libertarian. Well before I was libertarian is when I did customs. And you mean it's my duty to confiscate this knife that this kid's grandfather gave to him because it's made of fucking bone? No, like, hey, is this made of wood? He goes, no, it's made of bone. His friend's like, hey, idiot, he's telling you that, yeah, it's made of wood, and you freaking put it in your thing.
No, that's pure ivory. Hand carved.
One of the greatest lessons I learned from being in the military is deny, deny, deny.
Absolutely, right? But some of the propaganda and the brainwashing is strong, man.
Yeah.
And these folks are just, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Huh?
I have a funny story trying to get through customs leaving Iraq. I got my bag, everybody's bags get searched, and mine got searched, and I got in trouble for human body parts. I'd had my wisdom teeth pulled while I was in Iraq, and I was trying to keep them because, anyways, got in trouble. I was like, but they're my body parts. That doesn't.
How did you have proof that they were yours? Because that shit.
I guess I didn't think about it.
You just swipe teeth from a random body on the street.
Yeah, that's a lot worse than the damn Bic lighters I was forced to confiscate and shit.
Yeah,
my
So-
teeth.
the guy who lived in the hut next to me had a lot of those Japanese comic books, and some of them had some risque images that were like the customs agent really had a ball going through there asking him to explain what it was about. Like just
See,
he had a
that's
trunk
bullshit.
full
That's
of
what
books.
I hated my counterparts that would do that. You know, you come across a manila envelope full of Polaroids and you see a naked woman, it goes right back in there. I'm not about to rummage through your damn wife's naked photos right in front of you while you're standing there. I blew my mind when I would see my
They're just
shipmates
doing their
that
job,
shit.
TJ. Just doing their job.
Fuck that.
They got a mission.
That's where I know that I'm more of a libertarian thinker than many of these, because that shit, a lot of that stuff. Okay, a live round shouldn't be going with you. Okay, I'm going to take that, and you're going to be okay with me taking that, right? Because you didn't mean to have that shit in your bottom of your bag. But, and that was about it. Like, there was a guy that really took an anatomically correct ass, because women can have dildos, but men, you know, oh, no porn from the waist below. Well, this is a butt or something. So the guy stole it or confiscated it and got in trouble. He was actually an E6 and he got reprimanded.
He got busted for that?
Well, because he took it and the dude was like, "This is just my dildo. Why can women have dildos? That's from the waist down. Looks like it's a penis." I don't know.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was an interesting deployment. And
yeah, so
summer in Kuwait.
I don't know how to I don't know what to do with that.
That's the ass end of the podcast right there.
Ass end of the nice one, Jeremy. That's perfect.
LPMN.org. If you want to, looking for information about the party, join, become a member, or just generally donate. LPMN.org. And we'll see you next week.
Good seeing you guys.
Thanks.